Hi, this is Ramya Ravindran and welcome back to my channel Infinity for UPSC. Today we are going to cover the second chapter of medieval history and the name of the chapter is New Kings and Kingdoms. And in this chapter we are going to cover a time period from 7th to 12th century. We had already seen that medieval history starts from 700 AD to 1750 AD. And in the first chapter of medieval history, we had seen an overview of this entire time period. Now in this chapter, we are going to see from 7th century to 12th century in detail. So let us start. Major kingdoms 7th to 12th century, and here we have been given a map, so you need to refer to this map. So here we have got Chahamanas. Chahamanas are nothing but Chauhans. So Chahamanas, Gurjar Pratiharas, Paramars, Chandelas, Palas, Rashtrakutas. So Palas in the east, Rashtrakutas in the Deccan region, and Chahamanas, Gurjar Pratiharas, Chandelas and Paramars. All these kingdoms are located in this region, that is around Ganga and Yamuna valley. So this is the region which is covered by Chahamanas, Gurjar Pratiharas, Chandelas and Paramaras. Then here to the south we have got Cholas, Cheras and Pandyas. So Cholas towards the eastern coast, Cheras western coast and Pandyas towards the southmost tip. So here what are they saying? Many new dynasties emerged after the 7th century. This map shows the major ruling dynasties in different parts of the subcontinent between 7th and 12th century. Next, the emergence of new dynasties. By 7th century, there were big landlords or warrior chiefs in different regions of the subcontinent. Existing kings often acknowledged them as their subordinates or samantas. They were expected to bring gifts for the kings or overlords, to be present at their courts and provide them with military support. As samantas gained power and wealth, they declared themselves to be Mahasamanta or Mahamandaleshwara, that is the great lord of a circle or region. Sometimes they asserted their independence from their overlords. Now in the previous chapter itself, we had seen that the term Rajput, which means the son of the ruler. So that term was associated with people serving in the army. So that means an influential title has been given to these people. That is the people who are not very prominent or the people who are not belonging to the kingdom or to the dynasty, they were associated with such terms. Now what is happening? Now they are also sharing power with them. Then what else is happening? We had already seen towards the end of the ancient history that military support was given by some other person. That is, the military was not taken care of by the ruler. Ruler was not taking care of military, but this entire department was handed over to somebody else, and that person was giving the military support whenever it was needed by the ruler. So that means the ruler did not have the military support of his own. So that means these people have got highly influential title with them. They have got their own military. Then apart from that, the king is also sharing power and wealth with them. That means they are becoming more powerful than the king himself, because king is not having the military power with him, but these samantas, they are having the military power with them. So they have got power, they have got wealth, they have got military support, and they have also got high titles associated with them. So now these people, they are called as samantas, that means subordinate. But these people were not subordinate to the ruler, they were also sharing power with them, and that is the reason they were called as Mahasamantas or Mahamandaleshwara. So very important, Mahamandaleshwara, this is a term which is associated with samantas. And who are samantas? Initially they were subordinates to the king, but later the king started sharing power and wealth with them. And after some time, they also started asserting their independence. That is, they wanted to form a kingdom of their own. I have already told you in the ancient history itself that if king is sharing power with other people, and whenever the king becomes weak, those people with whom the power has been shared, they will try to overthrow this king whenever the king becomes weak. So similar situation was happening here also. So here it is the Samantas who are trying to overthrow the king himself. One such instance was that of the Rashtrakutas in the Deccan. So that means these Rashtrakutas, they were initially Samantas, but later they have overthrown the Lord himself, and after overthrowing the Lord, they have become the kings themselves. So Rashtrakutas in Deccan, they have overthrown the Chalukyas of Karnataka. So Chalukyas were replaced by Rashtrakutas, and Rashtrakutas were Samantas of Chalukyas. Now you also need to associate the place and the region. Rashtrakutas, they belong to Deccan. Chalukyas, they belong to Karnataka. In the mid-8th century, Dandi Durga, a Rashtrakuta chief, overthrew his Chalukya overlord and performed a ritual called Hiranya Garbha, which means golden womb. Now why it is called as a golden womb? Because when this ritual was performed, it was believed that it will give rebirth to the sacrificer, and the sacrificer will now become a Kshatriya even if he is not a Kshatriya by birth. So that is the reason it is called golden womb, because it is giving birth once again. And Dandi Durga, he had performed this ceremony called as Hiranya Garbha. Very important, Dandi Durga, he was the person who had overthrown the Chalukya rulers, and Dandi Durga, he is associated with Rashtrakuta. So Dandi Durga, a Rashtrakuta chief, he had performed this ritual called Hiranya Garbha, which converts a sacrificer into a Kshatriya. Now in the exam you might get this statement, that is Hiranya Garbha, this ritual will convert the sacrificer into Brahmanas. But that is a wrong statement. But you might think that it is a correct statement because Brahmanas have got the highest status in the society. But that is not true. It converts the sacrificer into a Kshatriya. So remember all these keywords. Rashtrakutas in Deccan, Chalukya, Karnataka, Dandi Durga, the first Rashtrakuta chief who overthrew the Chalukya ruler. And Dandi Durga, he had performed Hiranya Garbha, and it converts the sacrificer into a Kshatriya. So this was the case of Samantas, that is Samantas overthrowing the ruler and becoming the ruler himself. Now apart from Samantas, there were other cases also, that is men from enterprising families used their military skills to carve out kingdoms. Enterprising families in the sense people who are into business, that means these families have got no association with the kingdom or with the ruling family. That is, they are not Kshatriyas and they are not into warfare, but still the people who had the military skills, they also carved out kingdoms. And the examples are Kadamba Mayura Sharman and the Gurjar Pratiharas. So very important statement, Gurjar Pratiharas, initially they were into business. They belonged to enterprising families, but using their military skill, they had carved out a kingdom for themselves. So Harichandra, who belonged to Gurjar Pratihara, these people were Brahmanas and they gave up their traditional professions and took to arms. And they also successfully established kingdoms in Karnataka and Rajasthan respectively. So Kadamba Mayura Sharman, they belong to Karnataka, and Gurjar Pratihara, they had established their kingdom in Rajasthan. So once again, Kadamba Mayura Sharman, Karnataka, Gurjar Pratihara, Rajasthan. So Rashtrakutas, Deccan, Chalukyas, Karnataka, Gurjar Pratihara, Rajasthan. So these three dynasties, these are very important and you need to know the region with which these people are associated. Next, this is a wall relief from Cave 15 in Ellora. So in Ellora, there is a Vishnu sculpture as Narsimha. Narsimha means man-lion. And this is the work of Rashtrakuta period. So these kind of questions are often asked, that is the people or the dynasty which had constructed a particular temple, a particular carving, a particular sculpture, that is very important. So Vishnu as Narsimha in Ellora, this has been carved out during the time of Rashtrakuta. So very important statement, Rashtrakuta, Vishnu as Narsimha at Ellora. Next, administration in the kingdom. That is, the new kings who had established themselves recently, how did they administer the kingdom? Many of these new kings adopted high-sounding titles such as Maharaja Raja, which means great king, overlord of kings. Tribhuvana Chakravarti, that means lord of three worlds, and so on. Now, why did they adopt these high-sounding titles? Because they have become kings recently and they did not have the legacy which other kings had. That is, they do not have a powerful legacy with them. However, in spite of such claims, they often shared power with their samantas as well as associations of peasants, traders and brahmanas. Now these new kings, they themselves were samantas once upon a time, but they have overthrown their lord and they have become kings themselves. But after becoming king, they are also committing the same mistake. That is, they are also sharing their power with samantas. And not just samantas, they are sharing their power with association of peasants, traders and brahmans as well. Now, if you get this statement in the prelims which says that the new kings, they share their power with association of peasants. And if you're not given traders, brahmans and samantas, you might think that this is a wrong statement. Because why would a king share his power with association of peasants? But it is a correct statement. He indeed shared his power with peasants, traders, brahmans as well as samantas. So all these are correct. Then next, in each of these states, resources were obtained from the producers. Producers in the sense peasants, cattle keepers and artisans. Because these people, they produce something. So they are called producers. So these producers, they are supposed to give their resources to the king. Sometimes these were claimed as rent due to a lord who asserted that he owned the land. That means every piece of land belongs to the ruler, and that's why all these people are tenants on the land of the ruler and they are supposed to pay rent to the lord. Now even today this is the case. We all pay house tax or land tax. Even if we own that land, even if we own that house, we have to pay land tax and house tax because the land belongs to the state. State in the sense the country. In polity, the term state is used to refer to the country. So like today, even during those days, these people had to pay rent to the lord. Revenue was also collected from traders. Now why is this line given separately? Because here we are talking about producers and all these people are producers, and traders, they are not producers because they are just acting as the middlemen between the producers and the ultimate consumers. So these people who are not producers, they are also supposed to pay this rent. Then these resources which were collected from the producers and from the traders, those were used to finance the king's establishment, the construction of temples and forts, and that resource was also used to fight war. And once you win the war, it will give rise to more wealth because you can acquire the wealth of that land and the access to the land as well as trade routes. So that means you can collect land. The people who want to pass through this land will have to pay money to the ruler. So winning a war means more wealth. Then the functionaries for collecting revenue were generally recruited from influential families and the positions were often hereditary. That means the people who are collecting revenue, they are recruited from influential families or powerful families and the position is often hereditary. We had seen in ancient India that during the initial period of ancient history, even the position of king was not hereditary. That is, the position of the ruler was not hereditary and it was based only on the skill of the person. But here we see that the positions have become hereditary. The position for collecting revenue as well as the position in army have become hereditary. And this is one of the main reasons why these kingdoms started collapsing. Because they did not have efficient people to take care of their kingdom. The army was not powerful enough and the people who were taking care of revenue and the other people in the court, all those positions were hereditary and that is the reason these people could not survive or these kingdoms could not last for long. In many cases, close relatives of the king held these positions. 400 taxes. We had seen about taxes. Now there is some important information which has been given in a box. So that means this becomes important. The inscription of the Cholas who ruled in Tamil Nadu. So one more dynasty and one more region. Cholas you will have to associate with Tamil Nadu. So Cholas, Tamil Nadu. So this inscription of Cholas, it refers to more than 400 terms for different kinds of taxes. That means 400 types of taxes existed in Tamil Nadu during the time of Cholas. And the most frequently mentioned tax is vetti. Very important statement, very important statement. The most frequently mentioned tax is vetti, and this tax, it was not taken in cash but in the form of forced labor, kadamai or land revenue. So that means it was not taken in the form of cash but in the form of services. Kadamai means slaves. So all these are in the form of services. Then there were also taxes on thatching the house. Thatching the house in the sense roofing the house. The use of a ladder to climb palm trees, and a cess was also applied on succession to family property. So all these things were taxed, and it was mentioned in the inscription of the Cholas. So 400 taxes, and vetti is the most important one, not collected in tax but in the form of forced labor, kadamai or land revenue. Very important statement. So once again we'll revise the ruling dynasties and the region. Rashtrakutas, Deccan; Chalukyas, Karnataka; Kadamba Mayura Sharman, Karnataka; Gurjar Pratihara, Rajasthan. See, but it was not just limited to Rajasthan, they had extended their rule, but here we are learning whatever we have seen in this chapter. So Gurjar Pratihara, Rajasthan. Then Cholas, Tamil Nadu. Next is Prashastis and land grants. We had already seen this in the later phase of ancient India, that whenever a Prashasti has been written by the court poet or by the court author, it is not entirely true. Most of the things have been exaggerated so that they get good reward from the ruler. So Prashastis are not to be taken literally or very seriously. It has to be cross-checked with some other source. Now let's see what is mentioned here. Prashastis contain details that may not be literally true, but they tell us how rulers wanted to depict themselves. So they wanted themselves to be seen as valiant and victorious warriors. These Prashastis were composed by learned Brahmanas who occasionally helped in the administration. That means they are associated with the kingdom. Kings often rewarded Brahmanas by grants of land, and these grants were recorded on copper plates which were given to those who received the land. Now this thing had already began during the later phase of ancient history. There we had seen that the system of granting of land had begun. And here we see that these grants are recorded on copper plates. Then further, unusual for the 12th century was a long Sanskrit poem containing the history of kings who ruled over Kashmir. Now this is somewhat different from the Prashasti, because Prashastis are praises, and not just praises, those are exaggerated praises. But here we see some different story. So let's see what it is. So this was during 12th century, written in Sanskrit, and it contains the history of a king who ruled over Kashmir. And this Prashasti, it was composed by an author called Kalhana. So very important name, Kalhana. He used a variety of sources including inscription, documents, eyewitnesses and earlier histories to write his account. That means this person is cross-checking the detail with many sources and making sure that he is writing the correct thing. Unlike the writers of Prashastis, he was often critical about rulers and their policies. That means he used to criticize the rulers and their policies if those are not good. So that is the reason this statement becomes very important and this person becomes very important. So Kalhana, he was the author of a long Sanskrit poem, and it was about a ruler who ruled over Kashmir, and it was written in 12th century. So Kalhana you have to associate with 12th century, and he was often critical about rulers and their policies. Very important. Then here we have been given one more example of a Prashasti, and in this Prashasti they are talking about a ruler called Nagabhatta. And this Prashasti, it was written in Sanskrit and was found in Gwalior in Madhya Pradesh, and this is about Nagabhatta, who was a Pratihara king. So very important, Nagabhatta, he is a Pratihara king. These kind of questions are often asked. That is, you will be given the name of a ruler and you will be asked to associate the ruler with a particular dynasty or with the region which he had ruled. So Nagabhatta, Pratihara king. And what is this Prashasti mentioning? The kings of Andhra, Saindhava, that is Sindh, Vidarbha, which is part of Maharashtra, and Kalinga, which is part of Orissa, fell before him even as he was a prince. That is, all these people accepted their defeat even when this king was just a prince. Then further, he won a victory over Chakrayuddha, who is the ruler of Kannauj. He defeated the king of Vanga, part of Bengal, Anartha, part of Gujarat, Malwa, part of Madhya Pradesh, Kirat, who are the forest people, Turushk, that means Turks, and Vatsa and Matsya. And both these kingdoms belong to North India. Now looking at this Prashasti, we can assume that this is an exaggerated Prashasti because it claims that he had defeated almost all rulers, stretching from south to north. So this must be an exaggerated Prashasti. Now here what is important for us? Vidarbha, it is part of Maharashtra, Kalinga, part of Orissa, because you will be given such statements, you will be given a place and you will have to associate the place with the state. So Vidarbha, Maharashtra, Kalinga, Orissa, Vanga, Bengal, Anartha, Gujarat, Malwa, we know this, part of Madhya Pradesh. Then Kirat. Kirat means forest people. Very important, Kirat means forest people. Then these things we already know, Vatsa and Matsya, these are kingdoms in North India. So here you just need to note the place and the state. And plus you should also know that Nagabhatta was a Pratihara king. So Nagabhatta, Pratihara king, and all these places and the corresponding state. Then here in this slide we had discussed that whenever a land grant is made, it has been recorded on copper plates. So here we have been shown an example of the copper plates. So this is the record of the land grant. This is a set of copper plate recording a grant of land made by a ruler in the 9th century, written partly in Sanskrit and partly in Tamil. The ring holding the plates together is secured with a royal seal to indicate that this is an authentic document. So this that you see, this is a royal seal. So this indicates that it is an authentic document. What was given with the land? This is part of the Tamil section of a land grant given by the Cholas. So let us see what all things are mentioned in a land grant. We have demarcated the boundaries of the land by making earthen embankments as well as by planting thorny bushes. So this embankment, this defines the boundary of the land. Then this is what the land contains: fruit bearing trees, water, land, garden, orchards, trees, wells, open spaces, pasture land, village and hills, platforms, canals, ditches, rivers, silt ladder land, tanks, granaries, fish pond, beehives and deep lake. So with this statement, we can conclude that these people used to treasure all the natural entities or the natural features which were available in land, including the ant hills and the beehives. So all these things are recorded in the land grant so that the people who receive the land, they do not destroy any of these things. Then further, he who receives the land can collect tax from it. He can collect the taxes as fines, the tax on betel leaves, that on woven cloth as well as on vehicles. So tax was imposed on all these things: betel leaves, woven cloth and vehicles. He can build large rooms with upper stories made of baked bricks. He can get large and small wells dug. He can plant trees and thorny bushes, and if necessary, he can get canals constructed for irrigation. He should ensure that water is not wasted and embankments are built to protect the water. That means it will act as a barrier so that water doesn't overflow. So we can see that even water is very much valued, and they also make sure that whenever a land is granted to somebody, even that person should not waste water, and required measures have been taken for that. So what is important here? This was recorded in a land grant given by the Cholas, and they treasure everything. Every natural entity, every natural feature and every natural resource is treasured by them, and they make sure that it is not wasted or destroyed by the receiver of the land grant. So with this slide, we cover the Prashastis and land grants. So far we had seen the new kings and how do they administer the kingdom. Then we saw about Prashastis and land grants, and now we are going to see warfare for wealth. While each of the ruling dynasties was based in a specific region, they tried to control other regions. Now this thing we had seen when we discussed the Chola, Cheras, Pandyas. There also we had discussed that these people were ruling the respective kingdoms, but whenever they got an opportunity, they tried to overpower the other kingdoms as well. So similar thing was happening here in the north as well. And here we see three different parties struggling for a piece of land called Kannauj. And since three parties are involved here, we call it tripartite struggle. And who are those three parties? Gurjar Pratiharas. And where is Gurjar Pratihara in the map? Here. And we had already discussed that Gurjar Pratiharas, they belong to Rajasthan region. And I have told you that it was not just Rajasthan, but they had extended their kingdom further. So this is Gurjar Pratihara. And the other party is Rashtrakutas, who belong to the Deccan region. And the third party is Palas, which belong to the East India, that is the Bengal region. So Gurjar Pratiharas, Rashtrakutas and Palas, they fought for Kannauj continuously, and that struggle was called as tripartite struggle. So tripartite struggle between Gurjar Pratiharas, Palas and Rashtrakutas for Kannauj in the Ganga valley. Next, rulers also tried to demonstrate their power and resources by building large temples. So when they attacked one another's kingdoms, they often chose to target temples which were sometimes extremely rich. So here they are trying to say that whenever a ruler overpowers another kingdom, they destroy the temples in that region. But this was not the scenario earlier. Earlier we had seen that whenever a person establishes his kingdom, whenever he overpowers other person and establishes his kingdom, he builds some large monument at the center of the city so that he can show how powerful he is and how wealthy he is. So that was the custom which was followed. They used to construct something. But here they are talking about destruction, and that is because they want to mention about Mahmud of Ghazni. And he was a person who had plundered India several times, and every time he came to India, he had destroyed temples and he had looted the temple wealth. And that is the reason they have mentioned this statement that the rulers chose to target temples which were sometimes extremely rich. But this was not done by all the rulers, it was done by very few plunderers like Mahmud of Ghazni. So let us read more about Mahmud of Ghazni. One of the best known of such rulers is Mahmud of Ghazni, Afghanistan. He ruled from 997 to 1030 and extended control over parts of Central Asia, Iran and northwestern part of subcontinent. He raided the subcontinent almost every year, and his targets were wealthy temples including that of Somnath, Gujarat. It is said that he had plundered India 17 times. Much of the wealth Mahmud carried away was used to create a splendid capital city at Ghazni. So these people, they come to India, they loot India and they make their own kingdom somewhere else. So basically he was a plunderer who had looted India 17 times. So here you just have to remember that Mahmud of Ghazni from Afghanistan, he had looted India several times, and every time he had targeted the wealthy temples of India, including Somnath temple of Gujarat. Then this Mahmud of Ghazni, he was also interested in finding out more about the people he conquered, and he entrusted a scholar named Al-Biruni to write an account of the subcontinent. That is, he wanted to know more about India and Indians, and he had asked the scholar called Al-Biruni to write about India. This Arabic work, known as Kitabul Hind, remains an important source for historians. He in the sense Al-Biruni consulted Sanskrit scholars to prepare this account. So here you need to remember Mahmud of Ghazni, he had entrusted Al-Biruni to write about Indians, and that book is called Kitabul Hind. It is written in Arabic, but he had consulted Sanskrit scholars to know about India. So Al-Biruni, Mahmud of Ghazni, Kitabul Hind, written in Arabic, but he had consulted Sanskrit scholars as well. Then next, other kings who engaged in warfare included the Chahamanas. Chahamanas are nothing but Chauhans. We are more familiar with this name, Chauhans. So Chahamanas and Chauhans both are same. And Chauhans, they ruled over the region around Delhi and Ajmer. So this is their kingdom, Chahamanas, around the region of Delhi and Ajmer. Now these Chahamanas, they attempted to expand their control to the west and to the east. So west in the sense here and east in the sense here. But to the west, they were opposed by the Chalukyas of Gujarat. We know that to the west we have got Gujarat, and to the east we have got Uttar Pradesh. So we are having kingdoms to the west as well as to the east. So in the west we had Chalukyas. So these Chahamanas, they were opposed by Chalukyas of Gujarat and Gahadawals of western Uttar Pradesh. So this also you need to remember: Chalukyas, Gujarat, Gahadawals, Uttar Pradesh, and Chauhans, they ruled around Delhi and Ajmer. So here what is important, Chauhans who occupied Delhi and Ajmer, they were constantly trying to acquire the western portion and the eastern portion, but to the west we had the Chalukyas of Gujarat and to the east we had the Gahadawals of Uttar Pradesh. So this constant struggle was going on here. So till now we had seen three struggles. One was the tripartite struggle between Gurjar Pratiharas, Palas and Rashtrakutas. Second was Mahmud of Ghazni from Afghanistan raiding India. Then third is Chauhans trying to occupy the western region and the eastern region. Now if we discuss more about Chauhans, the best known Chauhan ruler was Prithviraj III. So Prithviraj III, this person is very important and he belonged to the Chauhans kingdom. So Prithviraj III is a Chauhan ruler. Now why is Prithviraj III important? He defeated an Afghan ruler named Sultan Muhammad Ghori. So Muhammad Ghori was defeated by Prithviraj III in 1191, but Prithviraj lost to the same person, that is he lost to Ghori in 1192. And this date is very important when it comes to Indian history. We will discuss more about this in the further chapter. And here you get to see that he had ruled till 1192 because 1192 he was defeated by Muhammad Ghori. So here what is important? Prithviraj III, he was a Chauhan ruler. He had defeated Muhammad Ghori in 1191, and this Muhammad Ghori, he was also from Afghan, but Prithviraj III, he lost to Muhammad Ghori in 1192, and 1192 it is an important date when it comes to Indian history. So once again, let us revise the ruling dynasties and the region. So Rashtrakutas, Deccan, Chalukyas, Karnataka, Kadamba Mayura Sharman, Karnataka, Gurjar Pratihara, Rajasthan, Cholas, Tamil Nadu, Chauhans or Chahamanas, region around Delhi and Ajmer, Chalukyas, Gujarat, and Gahadawals, western Uttar Pradesh. So that's all from my side. Please like, share and subscribe my channel, and I'll be back with the next video very soon. Thank you so much.